Hello, my loves, and thank you for tuning in to January 2019's Patreon video podcast. For those of you joining me for the first time, welcome. This is basically a 40-minute podcast where I answer some of your questions about art or art careers, and I'll have a slowed down time lapse of one of my pieces playing in the background if you want to watch and follow along. This piece featured today is a commission that I had started earlier this summer, and I'm finally done with it. It is a 16 by 20 inch oil painting that took me way too long. So throughout the course of this video podcast, you'll be able to see me actually fix my mistakes, rework things, change my mind, paint over things many times. It should be quite an interesting journey. All right, I'm going to move on to the questions because there are several this month and I want to make sure I have time to answer as many as I can. The first question is from Kristen, who asks, what advice do you have for an artist starting on YouTube? How to vlog? Also, how did you start with Patreon? I get worried about sharing my Patreon because I don't want to come across as asking for money. Yeah, this is a really interesting topic because I've had the same struggles where you really want to be able to make a living and support yourself, but also you don't want to come across as like a cheap salesman or someone who just cares about money and is constantly asking people to pay for things and buy things. It's something honestly to this day I still struggle with because I've never been like a salesman, or I never studied business or marketing or anything like that. For me, I just kind of want to quietly paint and draw, and if I could magically have my bills paid, that would be awesome. But unfortunately, if you want to make your art a career, you have to also deal with the business and career side of things. I think my biggest advice would be to not view it as asking people for money, because I don't think we should ever feel entitled to just be able to receive people's money for free. I feel like with my Patreon and my YouTube even, I try to always make sure that I'm fair and that I'm rewarding people either for their time or for their payment. So obviously on Patreon, it's a paid platform and there's different tiers. So the more you pay for, the more content you get. But there's also cheaper tiers where anyone can afford it. It's like $1 a month, and in exchange I still give something special, something that requires my work and my time, and something that people can't just get for free. And for YouTube, all the content on YouTube is free to viewers, but in exchange, people might have to sit through ads, or people might not get as thorough or as much or as exclusive of content as they do on Patreon. So there's always got to be a balance between you doing the work necessary to provide your content or provide your audience with the content that they value, and then you deciding how much to charge for each type of content. So I would say that when you start your Patreon and start your YouTube, try to not let your fear or your awkwardness of asking for money get in the way, but treat it kind of as a job. Like, in exchange for people's time, people's money, you're also putting in work and you're also giving them something beneficial. Also with YouTube, and this goes for vlogging as well, I would say my biggest advice for someone starting out is to just try to create consistent content that's of high quality. I know it can be hard, especially if you're just starting out and you don't have all the equipment, or maybe you just don't have enough practice, but try your best to at least put out a new video every 2 weeks or every week if you can. And with social media, there's no guarantees that people will follow you just because your content is good. A lot of it really is just luck and timing and something that is completely out of your control. But in case you do get lucky and people do find you, I think what attracts people to stay is the quality of your content and also the freshness of your content. So don't be discouraged if you're just starting out and your growth isn't as fast. We all have to go through that, and the people who don't are very lucky. Just keep doing it and try not to focus so much on the numbers or the growth, and focus more on the audience that you do have, no matter how small they are, and also focus on improving your skills and holding yourself to a high standard and using your YouTube or whatever social media platform as a way to kind of tell your story as an artist. It doesn't matter how many people are watching or how tough it gets sometimes. What matters the most is the kind of relationship that you have with your art and how you share that relationship with the rest of the world. Brianna asks, I'm curious, what are your greatest goals as an artist? Yeah, this question is always hard to answer every time, but I don't have one particular set of goals as an artist. I feel like I'm pretty open and flexible to whatever fate may bring me. Even when I first started out with this art career, I didn't know that I would be on social media. I thought I would just be going the local gallery route of trying to sell my work, in shops and local galleries or restaurants or art fairs or street fairs. I didn't think that social media, or I didn't even know that social media was such a powerful tool to sell your art online. So with that mindset, looking into the future, I feel like I'm pretty open to whatever the future decides for me. I don't even know if I'll be relevant on social media after a while. I don't know if social media in general will last a very long time, because it's still, if you think about it, still relatively new, like within the last decade or less. Was when social media really became like a force to be reckoned with. So I feel like no matter what, my goal is to always be making art, whether I'm selling it online, selling it in person, whether I'm teaching it, or, whether I can't do it at all anymore. I just never want to stop creating. I never want to give up this part of my life, because it brings me so much joy. But ideally, if things work out, I would love to continue growing my audience and growing my abilities. I know there's so much I still have to learn. And as much as I try to teach you guys stuff, there's still stuff that I'm learning every day. And sometimes you guys actually help me and give me really helpful tips too. So I never want to stop learning. I never want to stop improving. I never want to stop creating. And hopefully in the journey to do so, I can also pay the bills and eventually support my family. That would be nice. So yeah, I guess you could say my goals are pretty simple. The next question is from Tina, who says, "Hi Happy, I had a question regarding how you ship your framed pieces to your gallery shows. I recently got accepted into a gallery, so I will have to ship my pieces framed for the first time. My main concern is finding boxes big enough. My piece is about 17 by 21 inches framed, and it's hard to find boxes and affordable shipping at that size. What do you recommend?" First of all, congrats on getting into a gallery. That's awesome. So for shipping large pieces, I totally feel you. I go through the same struggles even to this day. There are many different solutions that I've found helpful over the years. One of them is I like to keep all of my Amazon boxes. So if I order something large like paper towels or toilet paper, or just have a large Amazon order in general, they'll usually come in a slightly larger box, and I'll always flatten them and store them in like a closet, or now I have like a basement. I store it there just in case. And even though sometimes the Amazon boxes are not shaped for framed artwork, meaning they're not like flat and rectangular, sometimes they're very cubic and just like a perfect traditional moving box, you can still find ways to cut the cardboard box afterwards. And this is something my fiance is really brilliant at, and I always ask him for help. But basically, if you have enough cardboard to work with, you can cut the cardboard and then kind of reshape it and then tape it around your painting. But of course, you have to also bubble wrap the hell out of your piece to make sure that it doesn't get damaged or broken during its travel, because I've seen instances where pieces get broken even though you do have a little bit of bubble wrap, but you never know. So I always just err on the side of caution and over bubble wrap my pieces so much that they look like a giant pillow or something. Another thing I do is if you order frames online, I save the boxes that the frames came in so that I can reuse the packaging material and the box when it comes time to ship the artwork with the frame around it. And lastly, I think for affordable shipping, my preference is to use USPS priority mail. It's safer because, especially for international orders, it usually has a faster time going through customs, or so they say. Also, you can get tracking, and depending on the weight, it isn't that much more than traditional ground shipping, and overall makes me feel safer. And with original artwork, they're precious. They're our babies. We don't want to risk anything. So I feel like it's okay to splurge a little bit on good, fast shipping. USPS, in my experience, has been a lot more affordable than every other type of shipping service, mainly UPS, FedEx. I haven't really tried anything else because those are the three that are available to me in my area. But yeah, USPS priority mail or USPS first class mail for lighter pieces. Oh, and one last thing I forgot to add is I often go to either frame shops or sometimes electronic stores and ask them if they have any extra boxes. A lot of these stores will throw out the boxes that their products come in or recycle them, and I usually ask, when they tend to recycle and if I can come by and pick them up. And usually the employees are more than happy to let me have the opportunity to reuse some of their boxes before they throw them out. So ask around, go to Target or Best Buy or your local Michael's and see if they'd be willing to let you go through their stash of abandoned cardboard boxes. That's also a great place to find a lot of big boxes. I used to use that technique a lot when I was moving apartments, and now I use it to ship my artworks. The next two questions I'll combine because they're very similar. They're from Sasha and Samantha. Sasha asked, how do you deal with having cats and doing oil painting? My cat is very dependent, so I don't want to lock her in her room, but I also don't want her jumping on my table and stepping on my paint palette or accidentally getting Gamsol on her or something. I'm starting up oil painting soon and was just wondering if this is an issue for you. And then Samantha asked, any tips on keeping pet hair off of your wet paintings? So yes, I have 2 cats and also 2 dogs, and I do often struggle with not wanting to lock my animals out of my room, but also not wanting them to disrupt or get my paintings dirty. So I totally feel you. Luckily, one of my cats doesn't like to jump up on me as much, but I have another cat, my cat Boogerface, who's very mischievous and very affectionate. So if she's in the mood to cuddle, she will jump on me no matter where I am, if I'm working at a table, if I'm working at the easel, and all my animals shed. So generally with animal fur, I would suggest keeping a pair of tweezers nearby while you're painting. I usually like to, if I can find a way to lift the hair off with a pair of tweezers, that works great, especially when the painting is still wet. But if I can't, I like to use my brush, and I basically gently go in reverse direction, like the opposite direction from where the bristles are pointed. So going against the grain of the bristles will sometimes push that hair out, and it'll get the hair stuck on the brush instead. And then you can lift the hair off from the brush using your hands or a pair of tweezers. And in terms of keeping the animals locked out, so I've basically observed my animals' habits. I find that if I feed them, they usually like to go to sleep afterwards and they're not as fussy. So I will usually feed them before I start my painting. Sometimes if I am working late into the night or have a really pressing deadline, I will unfortunately just have to lock especially my cats out, because they do jump on things and I don't want them getting toxic chemicals all over them or accidentally knocking over, my paint supplies. Luckily with the dogs, it's a little easier because they can't jump on anything. So they just kind of sleep in the corner of my studio, and we're able to keep each other company just fine. But yeah, with the cats, it's really rough. I would also recommend painting during the times of day where your cat usually sleeps. I know cats like to sleep during the day, and they're very nocturnal creatures. So if you get a lot of your painting stuff done during the day and save kind of your maybe writing or computer work for at night, then you have also more opportunities to let your cat in. But yeah, I totally feel your struggle. I hate locking my cats out. I just want to hang out with all my animals all the time. But sometimes, for their own safety and for your productivity, you might have to just say, sorry for a few hours. Next question is from Luz, who says, I'm just wanted to know how you're doing and how are you going with trying to work on a more finished first layer, and what would you say is the most difficult thing about it? Well, thank you so much for asking me how I'm doing. I'm still a little bit sick, but I'm getting better, so hopefully I'll be done by this weekend. And I have been trying to make my first layers a lot more refined. It is more time consuming because I'm used to the first layer going by really fast and then the future layers kind of taking more time. But I found that if I spend more time on the first layer, it really sets the groundwork for a much more easier and straightforward experience when it comes time to doing the future layers. The most difficult thing, I think, is getting all the details right. So instead of just color blocking or roughly sketching out the composition, I now have to take into account where all the little details are and making sure I don't accidentally erase any of the details. So I start off with a more intricate and detailed concept sketch. Sometimes I just sketch directly onto my painting surface, and then I kind of color in the lines of the concept sketch like a coloring book to make sure I can retain all the details. It's more time consuming, but like I said, it kind of pays off in the long run. The next question is from Sha Marie, and she asks, how do you seek out opportunities as an artist with no following? In that case, I think going local would be your best bet. You know, having a following on social media is great for online sales, but you don't need a following for in-person sales. So check out your local street fairs, art fairs, farmers markets, any sort of opportunities that allow local vendors and small business owners to set up a booth. Those are great and really fun events for you to not only have a chance to sell your work, but also to kind of get your work out in front of an audience and talk to people and gauge people's reactions to your art. Also, if you are looking for like gallery opportunities, a lot of times if there's not a lot of galleries in your town, or if the galleries in your town are too competitive or they're not accepting new artists, you can also ask a lot of your local coffee shops and restaurants and lounges. In the past, I found that even like living in San Francisco where there are so many galleries, all the local businesses still want art on their walls and still want to support local artists. So in just going around and asking restaurants and coffee shops if they'd be willing to have me hang up my work for free in exchange for just like a little extra publicity, I guess, most often they would say yes, and they were very happy to do it. So if you don't have a social media following, try your local opportunities. And if your town is really small, I would say it's worth it to drive to the nearest bigger city, because bigger cities often have a lot more of an art scene. So don't give up, and I wish you the best of luck. Ooh, this is an interesting question from Lady Tiana. She asks, are there any of your older video topics that you want to revise now that you're older / more experienced? Totally, all the time. I don't know if it's wanting to revise because, it's not that I look back and disagree with what I used to say, but it's more like I want to supplement or append more to certain videos. I feel like as I learn more, I'm also eager to share that new knowledge with you guys. And part of me feels kind of repetitive or feels bad for maybe making a video that's already been made. So if there was a way to just add more information to my older videos, that would be awesome without having to be redundant. But the main videos that first come to mind when thinking about answering your question are my oldest videos from back in the day before I bought a proper microphone and before I learned how to use, Adobe Premiere. I was using Windows Movie Maker, which didn't even allow me to do simple things like putting an image over a video or having like two sides of the same video. Everything was very basic and flat. And I also used the really crappy microphone from my old webcam. So I really wish I could redo those videos, just polish them up a little bit more and, give you guys like a more like high quality end result to watch and to view. And it's ironic because a lot of my older videos have the most views because they've been around longer, and I just wish I could improve the quality for everyone so that, I could be worth their time, I guess. The next question is from Mariah, who says, what camera do you use to capture your work for digital prints? So currently I mainly use my scanner. It's an Epson V600 Perfection scanner, and I only use the camera to kind of take work in progress shots or take quick shots of my works to share on social media or share on Patreon. But generally for like the final print image, I like to scan my pieces with my scanner. And the main reason is because it can scan at 1200 dpi, which means I can end up with a file that's big enough to print on multiple sizes, and it just works better for creating prints than having to use a camera, which I'm often limited by the number of megapixels on my camera. Next question is from Morella, who says, I would love a more in-depth tutorial on hand paintings. Awesome. Actually, I have been meaning to make a new video about hand paintings as well, because I myself have learned a lot, and I feel like my first video on how to paint hands was kind of basic. If you guys are curious, I have a video out on YouTube. I think you just have to search Happy D Artist how to paint hands and it should show up. But yeah, I'll definitely keep that in mind, and I'll put that as an option for you guys to request for your $10 exclusive Patreon video tutorial for next month. So thank you for the suggestion. Next, we have a question from Fennel Root, who asks, how did you first start perfecting anatomy? I struggle with getting myself to practice anatomy and would like to know how you did it when you first started out. So for me, before I became a full-time artist and I was just doing it as a hobby, I've been drawing my whole life, ever since I was a little kid. So when I was young, I mainly did photorealism. That was kind of the only thing I knew. And therefore, by association, I guess I practiced a lot with photorealistic anatomy proportions. But I don't think I quite got the hang of it. And even to this day, I still feel like there's so much I have left to improve on and learn in terms of anatomy. It's like a never-ending process. But I found that doing studies really helps. So if you can find like a nude model or some way to do figure drawing in person, I guess it doesn't have to be nude. If you don't have like access to a nude model, you can always ask your friends and family members to pose for you with their clothes on. But I find that when you try to draw something on like a 2D surface, you're drawing, you're painting, your tablet, and you're observing your subject that is currently in 3D, you learn a lot faster. Like the relationship between the 3D and the 2D teaches you so much more. So if I'm just copying from like a photo to a painting or a photo to a drawing, so going from 2D to 2D, I sometimes don't think about why I'm doing the things I'm doing, and instead I'm just copying mindlessly, kind of like one-to-one, almost like a photocopier. And when you're sitting in person and seeing a 3D subject in front of you, you might start actually realizing like, oh, okay, so the leg looks shorter here because of the perspective, or hey, this angle, like the nostril is shaped differently because this is the actual shape of the nostril. So from this angle, it looks like this, and then from that angle, it looks like that. So a lot of these small little relationships between the 3D subject to your 2D paper will kind of get ingrained in your memory a lot better, and it will teach you a lot of the why of anatomy instead of just teaching you how to properly copy something. But even if you don't have access to, like friends and family members, because honestly with me, I struggle with that too. I don't, not all of my friends and family members have hours of free time to just sit there in front of me. There are a lot of resources online. Pinterest, I think there's a website called Pose Space where you can find 3D images of nude models. So they'll have like the same pose in many different angles, so you can study that. Or even just, basing it off of one photo. Like a little practice is still better than no practice. So I would say do a lot of studies. I know they can be tedious and they can be boring, and you can't really like sell them or claim them as your own works, but studies are so helpful in refining your skills as an artist. Okay, next we have a wonderful list of many super interesting questions from Keshna. She asked a lot of these during my live stream, so if you guys are watching this video right now, it means you also have access to this month's live stream. And if you just scroll through my older post, you'll see the video for it. Basically, I will try to answer the ones that I didn't already cover in the live stream so that I can maximize the amount of different questions I can answer for you guys. Okay, the first question from Keshna is, what areas do you struggle with as an artist? I struggle with a lot. Pretty much every area that I need to do work on, I also have an element of struggling. I'm not complaining by any means. Of course, like I think any job comes with its struggles, so I'm very grateful to be able to have this job. But I think where I struggle the most is a lot of self-doubt. Like I always beat myself up because I think that I'm not productive enough, or I'm not doing things fast enough or doing well enough. I always tend to bite off more than I can chew. I have really high expectations for myself, and I end up, kind of overworking myself, overexerting myself. And so lately I've been trying to really find the balance between like spending my time on issues that are urgent, that need my attention, but also investing enough time in things that may not be as urgent but are good for your long-term success. So, you know, part of that is also I want to hire an assistant, someone who can help me with the business side of things so I can focus more on creating art, because I feel like lately I've been struggling with having enough energy and having enough, I guess, of a fresh mindset to come up with like, you know, creative, new, honest, and meaningful pieces. I feel like I'm just constantly playing catch up, if that makes any sense. Okay, the next question from Keshna is, I work at a paint and sip studio and I'd like to be able to share my contact information for commissions. Any advice on how to get that information out there and not feel sleazy or like I'm stealing customers? I don't think you should feel like you're stealing customers, because if you want people to hire you for commissions, it's a completely different area than, you know, paint and sip. So paint and sip, you're teaching them how to create a painting just in that particular event. And commissions, you know, it's something that they could do outside of a paint and sip class, and something they might use as gifts, they might use to hang up in their home. So I don't feel like you should feel sleazy. But if you don't want to feel like you're overstepping, you know, the paint and sips company's bounds, I would say maybe just have a personal artist business card that has your information on it, and you know, you have your email, maybe your social media handles, and maybe just on the card, if you want to write like, for commissions or custom artwork, you can email me at, you know, blah blah blah. So that way, if it's on a business card and you're not standing up there kind of advertising like, hey guys, just in case you didn't know, I also do commissions. Like, if you don't want to deal with the awkwardness of doing that, just putting it on a business card, and you can leave a business card like in a nice little pile in the front table or wherever you're instructing from. Or you can even just ask people like, hey, would you like a business card? So I feel like that might be a good solution. Wow, this next question is really important. I'm so glad you asked this, Keshna. It says, how do you manage and intentionally cultivate your relationship with your significant other? I am currently in a day job, have a part-time job, and would like to get my business off the ground before getting married in a few months. At this point, I only get to see my fiance 1 to 2 times a week. We don't live together. How do you incorporate self-care, and what does that look like? Well, first off, I applaud you for balancing so much on your plate. You're definitely a hustler, and I really admire like your work ethic and your spirit. So bravo to you on that. And also, secondly, just thank you for asking this question, because if you hadn't asked me, I don't know if I would have had like the courage to share my own experiences that are very similar to yours, because I always felt like I should just be professional and stick to only talking about art, and I never know what amount of personal details or my personal opinions I should share about like non-art related subjects. So I'm really glad you brought this up and gave me a chance to speak on it as well. It's really hard, even for my fiance and I, even though we live together. Sometimes the busyness of our careers and our lives does negatively influence our relationship, especially weeks where both of us are going through like a sprint or a lot of deadlines at work. Sometimes we won't even see each other, even though we live together. Like, we'll pretty much only spend a few minutes actually talking to each other. The other times we're just working or rushing through like a dinner. You know, sometimes we don't even eat dinner at the same table. Like, we'll each take our dinner back to our office so we can keep working. Or like we're both so exhausted from working all day that we don't have the energy to talk or to go out for a date. We just want to like sit on the couch and be in a vegetative state. So I think these instances are okay in terms of like short sprints. You know, like everyone has to go through exceptions and extraordinary times that are not normal. So I totally get that. But I think it's definitely important to make sure to train yourself to not let this be a habit and not let it turn into a frequent or long-term thing, because relationships are just like a career, just like any job. They need a lot of attention and work in order to succeed. So I realized that one of my flaws was I was shelving the relationship. I saw it as like this thing that will always be there that I didn't need to worry about, this thing that's always second priority to like my business or my deadlines or my work. And what that meant was, if my fiance and I were having any conflicts or having any fights, instead of taking the time to talk about it, communicate, and maybe risk fighting again, we would both go for the easier option, which is to not talk about it, bury our feelings, shove them under the rug, and then just free up our time and headspace to focus on our work instead. And while in the short term, it seems like a good idea to prioritize your career and your work deadlines, in the long term, what it did was it made us grow distant from each other. We were either really resentful because we never got to air out our, frustrations, or we just lost the motivation to really invest quality time to spend with each other. We got so used to the habit of just working that we forgot to make time to go on dates and reconnect. And, it just ends up we went through a really bad phase earlier this year, and we're still kind of struggling to get out of it, where we almost feel like strangers because we just pass by each other briefly during the day and we're both just so preoccupied with work. So one thing we've been doing recently pretty well this last month is forcing ourselves to take even just an hour a day to sit down and not have any distractions and just be with each other and do something fun together. You don't have to go out, you don't have to pay for a fancy day. Even just for us, we love eating dinner on the couch and watching Conan O'Brien. Slowly we finally got used to laughing around each other and realizing hey, we actually have all this stuff in common. I almost forgot, we both have the same sense of humor, we love the same things. I feel like self-care is along the same vein. You have to take time off each day to do something fun for yourself that's not related to work, even if it's just an hour of time to browse Reddit or veg out on your couch or to watch your favorite guilty pleasure reality show. You have to make sure that you don't let your whole day pass by without taking a moment to relax and enjoy that day. That being said, though, I do also believe that, it is important to hustle and to make something of your career. I don't think all the successful people and companies were just made overnight through, pure luck. A lot of work goes into it and a lot of sacrifices go into it. So for me, it's make sure those periods where you really are head down working and struggling and hustling and prioritizing your work, make sure those periods are not the norm. It's okay to do those every once in a while, but overall your routine, I would recommend your routine to be a balance of work and also your work-life balance. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking time off work to focus on your self-care and to care for your relationship. And I also don't think there's anything wrong with sometimes being understanding, and hopefully your partner's also understanding towards you needing to prioritize work for a while. It's all about kind of maintaining your expectations and finding that balance. And also, lastly, one thing I've learned that my fiance and I need to do better is to just tell each other, give each other a heads up. Hey, next week I have, my gallery piece due and I might be really busy. So, just please don't take it personally, or FYI, just a heads up. And then how about the week after that? Let's plan something. Let's get away for the weekend. So if you manage your partner's expectations ahead of time, you guys can also plan, for further into the future to make up for that lost time. Okay. The next few questions I'll bundle together because they're very similar. Keshna says, what tips do you have to come up with concepts and ideas? And what tips do you have for artists and storytelling, or coming up with stories to share about your art? So in my very brief experience, trying to be more creative and doing art full time, and of course there's still so much I have left to learn. There's so many different varying experiences out there. I'm not saying mine is the best one, but from my personal brief experience, ideas don't come to me fully fleshed out, and they don't come to me super often. It's a rare occurrence when I can get, an entire kind of complete idea for a piece of art that just magically manifests itself in my brain. Usually what happens to me is I get little snippets and chunks of ideas, and they're usually without context, and they themselves alone won't really make for a complete or very interesting piece. So, sometimes, for example, I'll be listening to a song or taking a walk and I see some beautiful scenery or watching a movie. Whenever I'm out and about in my day and my brain is turned on, sometimes I'll receive like a small little clip or a small like simple phrase like, okay, a girl with pink hair laying in a swamp, for example. But like, what do the details look like? Like, is she a mermaid? Is she a regular girl? Is the swamp at night? Is it during the day? What's in the swamp? You know, what kind of flowers, what kind of colors? Like, I don't have those ideas fully fleshed out. But if I hear my mind's eye telling me, okay, girl with pink hair in a swamp, what I'll do is I'll immediately rush to jot it down or to sketch it if I have a quick like way to sketch something. So if I have my sketchbook on me, I'll sketch it. If I don't, I'll go on my iPhone and I'll just go into my notes app and write down the sentence. I'll describe it with as much detail as I can at the moment. And then later on, when I have to work and create a piece, I will go through my inventory of ideas, whether that be my sketchbook or my phone. And from those ideas, more ideas can sprout. So if I start off with girl with pink hair in a swamp, you know, I could then, when it's time for me to actually do a fully fleshed out concept sketch, I could be like, okay, well, maybe like the flowers will be pink so that they can match her hair. Maybe the setting will be nighttime so that the light pink hair can stand out against the dark background. Maybe she'll be a mermaid because she's in a swamp, you know, and da da da. So I feel like coming up with ideas isn't like a thing you can intently do or sit down and do perfectly, at least not for me. You know, other people might, and if so, like, I really admire that. But for me, it's like I always have to have a backup stash of ideas, and then I work from those and try to build from those. But I also feel like storytelling is very similar to concepts and ideas. The stories I tell start off very vague. I don't have like an exact character or even any sort of personality traits or rules or you know, any details about the world the character lives in. I just have like a general vibe, and even the vibe itself is very vague. So sometimes I'll look at a piece and say like, I want this piece to feel really quiet, or I want this piece to feel really lonely, but like a chill type of lonely, or I want this piece to feel like magical and whimsical, almost like a childlike wonder. So using these kind of very vague, nebulous starting points, I'll try to make sure that my character and the background elements and the colors and everything I use generally fits into those vague ideas. That being said, though, I think for me, I like to leave things open. I actually really enjoy hearing other people's stories and how they interpret my work. So I try not to tell too like explicit or too direct of a story with my pieces. I always like to leave room for interpretation so that the viewers can project their own memories, their own thoughts, their own experiences onto my pieces, and then create their own interpretations that way. I know sometimes it can be awkward when artists are asked to share the meaning or the story behind their works, you know, whether it's a person next to you asking you, hey, what is this piece about? Or sometimes, in my experience with gallery shows, galleries will ask you to write a few sentences describing, you know, your piece and the story behind it. So if a person asks me what story my painting is trying to tell, and I don't really have a solid story for them, I'll usually ask them. I'll say, well, what story does it tell for you? What do you think this piece is about? What do you see in it? And I always feel like people give me the most interesting, meaningful answers when I kind of turn the question back on them and then they can reflect on it. And also with gallery pieces, instead of, you know, writing a description about like the story behind the character, I sometimes will focus my explanation on what inspired me to create the piece and also the feeling and mood I want to convey rather than the exact plot or story I want to tell. So yeah, hopefully these tips help you. And I'm reaching the end of my podcast now, so I'm going to wrap it up. But I just wanted to thank you guys again for being so awesome this month and, you know, bearing with me. I had a kind of a rocky start to the new year, and you guys have been just so encouraging, so supportive, and I just had a blast at this month's live stream, even though I was a little under the weather. You guys are so patient and humorous and always ask me such insightful questions, and to this day I'm still really flattered and humbled that you guys valued my advice and value my opinions, because, sometimes I feel like I'm still learning so much. So thank you for all of your support and love. Have an awesome day wherever you are, and I really hope to catch you guys next month. Bye.